For 6 years, Europe watched Germany rebuild its military. Borders shifted. Governments backed down. Every concession was meant to be the final one. When Poland collapsed in September 1939, it collapsed in 3 weeks, hit from the west by Germany and from the east by the Soviet Union at exactly the same time. Britain and France declared war on Germany. Neither was prepared. Neither had a strategy that truly worked. 85 million people would be dead before it was over. Entire cities disappeared. Weapons that hardly existed in 1930, carrier aircraft, ballistic missiles, atomic bombs, had become standard military hardware by 1945. The war didn't arrive all at once. It came together from smaller moments, choices inside cabinet rooms, mistakes on battlefields, the angle of a single bomb at the precise second it left the bay. The 100 cards in this deck are those moments, the ones that shaped how it ended. In the spring 1940, France had the largest army in the world. It had the Maginot Line. It had Belgium as protection. It survived 6 weeks. In the summer of 1940, Britain stood alone. German troops were stationed on the Channel coast, 40 kilometers from Dover. The Luftwaffe flew 46,000 sorties, trying to destroy the RAF. On certain days, Fighter Command was down to its final reserves. On September 15th, it brought down 60 German aircraft in a single day, and Hitler delayed the invasion indefinitely. Churchill's strength wasn't strategy, it was stubborn refusal. His own cabinet believed a negotiated peace was the sensible option. He refused even to consider it. Every campaign that followed, in the Atlantic, in North Africa, eventually on the beaches of Normandy, began with that choice. By December 1940, Britain had survived, but it hadn't achieved victory. It was being kept alive by American credit, by German hesitation, and by 21 miles of water Hitler could not cross. On June 22nd, Germany invaded the Soviet Union. 3.8 million men. A front 3,000 kilometers wide. Hitler expected 12 weeks. It killed 27 million Soviet citizens. By December, the advance had stalled in the snow outside Moscow, and Wehrmacht soldiers were freezing in summer uniforms because nobody had prepared for a campaign lasting into winter. Every panzer division trapped in that mud was a division not guarding Germany's western border, not reinforcing Rommel, not defending the factories in the Ruhr. The Eastern Front alone would eventually consume 4 million Axis soldiers and 8 million Soviet troops in uniform. Numbers that make every Western campaign look small. The conditions defied description. 40 below zero. No supply lines. Orders issued by men 1,000 kilometers from the front. By the winter of 1941, both sides were operating at the edge of what armies could survive. Then Japan attacked America. The assumption was that the United States was too distant, too divided, too unprepared to react before Japan secured its Pacific Empire. Wrong on every count. By 1944, American factories were producing a warship every day and a heavy bomber every hour. The Lend-Lease program alone delivered 14,000 aircraft to the Soviet Union. Neither Germany nor Japan had accounted for that. The war's outcome wasn't settled at Pearl Harbor, but the mathematics already were. In the spring of 1942, the Axis controlled more territory than at any stage of the war. Japan held most of Southeast Asia. German armies were nearing the Caucasus oil fields, Rommel was driving toward the Nile. On paper, almost everything was moving their way. None of the turning points looked decisive at the time. Midway was a catastrophe for Japan, but Japan still controlled most of what it had conquered. Stalingrad was surrounded, but not finished. El Alamein was one battle in a secondary theater. What 1942 actually revealed was simpler. Every major Axis offensive had reached its limit. Supply lines too long, reserves too thin. The enemy still standing. The Allies were producing more with every passing month. Britain and the United States alone were building 2,000 aircraft a week by the end of the year. Those two lines were eventually going to meet, and everyone studying the numbers understood it. Guadalcanal ran for 6 months. Most people know the landing. They don't know the 7 naval battles that followed, or the Marines surviving on half rations and constant rain. Japan committed 2 divisions and most of a naval flotilla on a piece of jungle it never controlled. By February 1943, the island was gone, and so was Japan's ability to sustain a prolonged offensive campaign in the South Pacific. By 1943, the Axis was losing on 3 fronts at the same time: Stalingrad in the east, Tunisia in the south, the Atlantic. None could support the others. The Battle of the Atlantic rarely reached front pages, but in May 1943, 43 U-boats were sunk in a single month. Dönitz pulled his submarines back. From that point onward, American supplies crossed the Atlantic freely. 15 million tons of cargo that year alone. Without that, D-Day never happens. At Kursk in July, Germany launched its final major offensive on the Eastern Front, the largest tank battle in history, and a crushing German defeat. From that moment, Soviet forces never stopped advancing west. Italy's surrender looked like a shortcut. It wasn't. Germany occupied the country within hours and turned the peninsula into a defensive barrier. Allied armies fought north for 2 years, mountain by mountain, river by river. The front that was supposed to ease pressure on France created a separate war of its own. The strategic bombing campaign rarely appears on lists of decisive moments. But by 1943, it was consuming a third of all German war production, not to build new weapons, but to repair damage. Anti-aircraft guns that should have been on the Eastern Front were defending the Ruhr. Radar equipment that should have been at sea was protecting Hamburg. The bombers rarely stopped the factories, but they forced Germany to fight a war it hadn't planned for, with resources it needed somewhere else. D-Day gets most of the attention. Two weeks later, the Soviet Union launched Operation Bagration on the Eastern Front. More troops, more tanks, more ground gained, more German casualties than Normandy. Germany lost its offensive capability on both fronts within weeks of each other. The liberation of France moved faster than anyone expected. Paris in August, Brussels in September. By December, Allied troops were on the Rhine, and people genuinely believed the war might end by Christmas. Then, on December 16th, Germany attacked through the Ardennes with 41 divisions. Total surprise. Almost no ground gained. The last German strategic reserve spent in the snow of Belgium. The men who froze there were men Germany could never replace. In the Pacific, Japan had lost its carrier air power by June. The island-hopping campaign had brought B-29s within range of Tokyo. Japan was still fighting, but it was fighting to make the cost high enough to force a settlement. No settlement ever came. By late 1944, Germany was losing more tanks per week than it was producing. Fuel was so short that Luftwaffe pilots were receiving 30 minutes of flight training before combat. The Wehrmacht was filling its ranks with 15-year-olds and men discharged as unfit in 1940. The country that had launched the most mechanized invasion in history was running out of everything and still fighting. By early 1945, Germany was collapsing from both directions. The men who had started the war fell within weeks of one another, most of them violently. Japan was different. At Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the fighting cost 12,000 American dead, 2 small islands. An invasion of the home islands was expected to cost 1 million casualties on the Allied side alone. The Japanese military was preparing to arm civilians with bamboo spears. The atomic bomb ended that calculation. It also began another one. Within 4 years, the Soviet Union had tested its own device. Every major power now understood what was possible. The world that emerged from 1945 was one where total war had new limits, not because anyone chose that, but because the weapons made it unavoidable. 2,194 days after it began, 85 million dead, and a world nobody had really intended to create. What the numbers can't carry, the details sometimes can. 3 survivors from HMS Hood's crew of 1,415. 4 minutes at Midway that ended Japan's carrier fleet. A clear sky over Nagasaki that moved the target from Kokura. The war produced the United Nations, the nuclear deterrent, NATO, the Cold War, and the decolonization of half the planet. None of it was planned. All of it came from moments like the 100 on these cards, and from millions of individual decisions made by people who had no idea how it was going to end. Japan signed the surrender on the deck of USS Missouri on September 2, 1945.